Welcome to the Point Man Podcast. This is a mic'd up men's group of 4 Catholic fathers challenging each other to be the point man for their families. Welcome to the Point Man Podcast. We are a mic'd up men's group of 4 Catholic husbands and fathers trying to encourage each other to be the point man for their family. In other words, to be the best husbands and fathers that we can be. If you're listening for the first time, we share our thoughts, our opinions, our struggles, our joys on this journey in faith. This season, we are taking a hard, long look at the OG point man, St. Joseph himself, guardian of the Redeemer, protector of the Virgin Mary, protector of the Christ child, and raising him, somebody that we can all look for and towards when we see his virtues and his characteristics that make him the OG point man. So joining us as always, Clint Captapon, Sam Blair, Jason Angelette. But today we have a very special guest as we dig into the particular characteristic and virtue of St. Joseph's chastity. Jason Evert, the founder of the Chastity Project, chastity.com. Such a timely visit from you, and we're so appreciative of you being here. So thank you very much.
Happy to be on. Thanks for having me.
Jason has spoken for decades on the teachings of St. John Paul II, the theology of the body, the great gift that is the theology of the body in terms of chastity, charity, love, and what it all really means. So we are going to dig into St. Joseph's chastity, but we always start with a check-in as kind of our Bible study, men's group. Yeah. Usually we're going to kick it around, but we'd actually like to just open it up to you and say, thank you for being with us. What's going on with you these days?
Highs and lows. It's been a hard week. Being someone who speaks on college campuses on the subject of gender, the recent, assassination of Charlie, really, really hit home because their families, near us, and it's been heavy, especially on my wife saying goodbye to me on this trip to go speak. She was in tears, and just letting go of the kids. And, my 13-year-old daughter, we went to the church to do a little prayer service for the Kirk family. And as I was walking out the door, my 13-year-old said, "To be safe, Dad." Yeah. And it's just the fact that my 13-year-old daughter even has to wish me safety on the way to go pray the rosary with a dozen friends. Yeah. It's a tough time on the family. So we're, having to double up security measures for the house and things like that. Because I've gotten death threats as well. And it's just, so I did a podcast earlier this week on just what to do with all that anger and sadness and fear. When you feel all that, like where's the righteous anger? When is that human vengeance? And how do we kind of process all those emotions? As men going through this. So it's been quite a week at the Evert household, to say the least. So
yeah. Do you feel like it's more pronounced today than it has been a year ago, 5 years ago? You've been speaking for a long time.
Yeah. No, a friend of mine said it feels like the devil's making a run for it.
Yeah.
The hockey stick acceleration of all this stuff, not just in the last year, but the last decade or so. There's stuff we're having to address now at these assemblies with these kids that weren't even on the radar 10, 15 years ago. Right. And I think a lot of that is the phones. That's where they're getting a lot of these ideologies and things. Yeah, definitely, as my friend said, it just feels like the devil's making a run for it. But, where sin abounds, obviously grace all the more.
I skipped right over, my bio and the introduction of you. You've written 15 books. Toured every continent. I think maybe except Antarctica.
They're holding out on me, but
right.
But they do use our chastity stuff at a military base in Antarctica, so we've kind of made it there, but not in person yet. So,
spoken at World Youth Days. This is just something that is very near and dear to your heart. I know, as we unpack this topic of chastity, and especially through the lens of St. Joseph, maybe just a toss-up right at the beginning. The word chastity, I think immediately might be divisive or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
How do you define chastity?
Yeah.
And as maybe also opposed to or along with abstinence or celibacy?
Yeah.
So just the opening.
Yeah, a lot of people get the words confused. Obviously, abstinence is just the absence of sex. That's all it means. So if you say that somebody's abstinent, it really doesn't tell you anything about that person. Maybe they're abstinent because they can't find a date. Maybe they're abstinent because they're virtuous. Maybe they're abstinent because they passed away 100 years ago. Like, they're all abstinent. Like, doesn't tell you anything. It's just what they're not doing. Celibacy means the state of not being married. So that's all that means. So you could be celibate and technically not abstinent. You could be celibate and chaste and pure. But chastity is a virtue, kind of like courage or honesty, that applies to your sexuality. And it doesn't eliminate our sexual attractions or desires. It orders them according to the demands of authentic human love. And so the function of chastity is to free you to love and to free you to know if you're even authentically being loved. So it kind of frees you to love, because if I can't say no to my sexual impulses, then saying yes to them means really nothing. But then it also frees a person to know if they're being loved, because if a person's unwilling to be with you, if you won't do those things, then it's not really you that they desire, but the pleasure that they can get at your expense. And so it's a liberating virtue. Unfortunately, the word has so much negative connotation and baggage associated. There's this frigid, prudish, repressive, neurotic, Victorian attitude, but it has nothing to do with that. I mean, John Paul II even said that the more we grow in purity, you come to an ever greater awareness of the gratuitous beauty of the male and female bodies, and that beauty becomes a light for your action. So it doesn't mean that I'm getting increasingly cold and numb to the beauty of the human person, but that our eyes are actually getting open to it, and then seeing the body for what it is, an invitation to love instead of something to grasp and use. So it's a beautiful vision of human love that unfortunately most have never heard.
I love the fact that it's a gift, right? It's that chastity is a gift that we receive from our Lord and Giver, who provides the grace to be able to do what we're being asked to do and to love the way that we're called to love. But it's not like this repressive feeling. I think that a lot of people are thinking like it's either indulge or repress, but our Lord, our faith is revealing to us something beautiful more. Can you explain?
Yeah, I mean, John Paul even addresses that in his book, Love and Responsibility. He talks about in the initial phases of practicing chastity, it does feel like a loss, because it's a purgative stage. You're having to let go of these kind of false companions that have been with you for some time that you would cling to for consolation, but as you pass through that first stage, you realize, no, I'm not losing anything. I'm gaining self-mastery. I'm free to love instead of using somebody. And, a woman is very perceptive in the way that a man looks at her, not just from 100 yards away, but, from right up close. And if they sense that we're looking at them as something to be used, it creates kind of this restless vulnerability and a resentment towards men or towards sexuality. But John Paul points out that, when you grow in this purity of heart, he says you can actually give your wife all the peace of the interior gaze, meaning that when you look at her, she's peace. She feels safe under her brother's gaze because she's not a menu item. She's not something to be grasped at. She's your respected and beloved companion. And when he uses those phrases, I think every man's like, I want to give my wife that. Like, I want to make her feel safe under my gaze instead of feeling like I don't have enough self-control to even make a gift of myself to begin with. And so it's much more than just coping mechanisms and boundaries you can't cross. It's a transformation of the heart that ultimately, as you said, is a gift from him. It's not like I'm getting stronger and stronger and stronger. If anything, I'm becoming more keenly aware of my own weakness and dependency on God.
Jason, you've been at this a while. What drove you into this mission field?
Part of it was when I went to college, I led some high school retreats, and the kids opened up to me about all the stuff that they're going through. And it was heavy stuff, and they had no formation with human love. And then I was also doing 3 years of sidewalk counseling at an abortion clinic in Pittsburgh. And, I'm meeting women, and they're having an abortion in 45 minutes. And I just started feeling late after years of doing this. Like, why am I meeting a woman right before abortion? Like, why couldn't I have met her when she was 15? Because maybe if she learned about chastity then, she never would have dated this guy to begin with. And so I realized I was standing on the banks of a flooded river and throwing just sandbags on it. And there's a dam busted a quarter mile upstream. And if I could just plug the thing, because I could stand here the rest of my life and it wouldn't change the number of people coming right to this door. And I realized, okay, this is part of the pro-life battle, the availability.
Right.
But everyone looks at the supply of abortion. No one looks at the demand for it. If we can remove the demand, which is on chastity, then supply no longer becomes an issue.
Right.
And at the time I was doing these, missionary work, I was also reading Love and Responsibility for the first time from John Paul II. And I was holding that, I'm like, this is it. Like, this is the antidote, this understanding of human love. That's not just like true and good, but it's actually beautiful. And when I started sharing that with the young people, the lights went on. I mean, because they're starving. I was just in Baton Rouge, last week, and a boy came up to me after the talk, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm probably the worst guy on this campus. He said, I lost my virginity when I was 12 to an 11-year-old girl. And he said, it's just been downhill ever since. And like these guys are just starving to death and they don't even realize that there's an answer other than just shame and condemnation, that's not what chastity is about.
I definitely want to make a plug for like your website, chastity.com, that like there's a lot of guys listening to the show that fathers and to be able to have hope that the work that you've done, the resources that you have available can really help them in their conversation with their sons and their daughters to help them to introduce this. Because I'm thinking about like, obviously guys, like we need to be able to allow this challenge to hit us and to take on the responsibility that we need to be able to live pure and chaste lives ourselves. But at the same time, like we have a responsibility to our sons and daughters to make sure that we're helping them to form them in faith. So just anything you wanted to say to that?
Yeah, because the parents are the primary sex educators of the kid, not chastity speakers or clergy or principals or whatever. It's the parents. But a lot of parents are like, well, who am I to talk? I wasn't some spotless virgin when I got married.
Right.
They think they're disqualified because they don't have a perfect past. But, I remember being on a retreat with you and talking military stuff, and they were saying how the military has this strategy for this swift and overwhelming victory. It'd be to, take out command and control, and then you cut lines of communication, and then you isolate and eliminate the units. And I remember one of the guys said that. I'm like, wait, say that again.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, yeah, you take out command and control. I'm like, okay, wait, this is what the devil does.
Yes.
Take out command and control, the father, and the parents, and then you cut the lines of communication, not only between them, but between them and the kids. And then the kids are on phones and they're locked in their bedrooms and it's 10 o'clock at night and they're getting their formation on Instagram. And then once you've taken out command and control, you've cut the lines of communication, then you can isolate and eliminate the units. Yeah. All the kids are in the room alone and now just eliminate them one by one. And it was like, holy cow, it works for the military, works for spiritual warfare as well. And so this is why we look to St. Joseph as like, okay, how do we reverse all this stuff? How do we protect the units? How do we restore communication? How do we stay in command, in a way that's a servant leadership as a husband and father? So.
Talk about like the square peg round hole. It's like this idea that like, I'm going to talk to my kid about chastity and this is going to be so hard. They're not going to receive this. It's just going to be like, it's a losing battle, but it's like, no. It's like, this is what we're made for. Like it's the lie is the square peg going into the round. Like it doesn't fit. Like the truth, we're made for truth. We're not made for the lie.
Yeah. And the fathers have to speak. Because like if you don't, and if you just like, well, that's, you tell the wife to do it. Well, you're the religious, spiritual, ethical person, you deal with that stuff. If the dad doesn't speak, the children will automatically assume dad disagrees with mom, but he's just being respectful. Because if he really agrees, you'd talk, but you're so quiet because wink, wink, dad boys are going to be boys.
Yeah.
And so the silence is deafening when the father doesn't speak up. And so he's got to. Could it be awkward? Well, yeah, but that's part of the authenticity of the whole thing. It's not some perfectly canned speech. A friend of mine, he knows all the theology of body and everything and does chastity talks, and he told his son how babies were made. He thought this is going to be beautiful. And the kid was disgusted. And he's like, Dad, how long have people been doing this? And I said, tell him the 1960s. And then he said, Dad, is there any other way? I'm like, that's pretty much it. And then the daughter came up later and said, Daddy, I want to be like the Blessed Virgin Mary. And the dad's like, oh, that's great. And she said, yeah, I want to get pregnant before I'm married. And the dad's like, no, that's not the story there. So like, yeah, it's going to be awkward, but that's fine. Like you have to intervene. You have to interfere. And yeah, you might get some eye rolls or whatever, but like this isn't a talk. This is a conversation. It's not like, when do I give my kid the math talk? When do we have the English lesson? It's like, no, they get 12 years of that, then they go to college. And if they're getting one talk in human sexuality, then heading off for the frat house, good luck with that.
Yeah.
I think talk about just a couple of glory stories if you don't mind. Like I some recently I saw some of the emails come through about just amazing things that have happened. Again, because I want to highlight like this message is so worth the fight for us to embrace ourselves, but us to share with, especially with our kids, with our community. Like this is freedom that we're in bondage with the lie. So some of the glory stories.
I should preface any of them by the fact that we have 100 convents of nuns praying for the talks. And so it needs to be very clear that I'm buying souls with other people's money. Okay. So lest people think, oh, you must give a really good chastity talk. The intercession.
And it is. It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, it's because they're doing the heavy lifting as the religious sisters. But we get to just see miracles all the time. It's beautiful. One girl emailed me, and she, I guess her mom gave her one of the chastity talks and the chastity book, and she's like, no, I'm going to read that. She sleep with her boyfriend or whatever. And then her friend came over who's a stripper, And she started complaining to the stripper. Yeah, my mom wants me to watch this stupid chastity video. And the stripper's like, well, let's watch it. And so she said, we literally got Oreos and milk and watched a chastity talk. And the girl whose mom gave her the video, she didn't want to hear it. She was getting up, walking out of the room. She was just agitated. And the stripper was just glued into the video. And then when it was over, the stripper was like, can I borrow it? And the girl's like, yeah, you can have it. And so the stripper took it and started showing it to other strippers, showing them chastity talks, and then got the book. And then the other girl came to her senses, like, okay, I need to watch this thing. And then she watched it, and then she started buying our chastity book. She said, I bought 17 of the same books so far to give it to all my girlfriends. And so it's just that they're starving and they don't even realize it. And so you get to see some beautiful stuff. We were at a public high school in Texas, and a girl came up dating this controlling, possessive, abusive older guy who just treated her like garbage. I said, sweetheart, you deserve just so much better than just break up. She said, I can't break up. I've given him everything, my virginity, my reputation. I can't let go of it all. And I'm looking, I got to get to the next assembly soon. And she's showing me bruises of this guy. No. And she just had a miscarriage from his baby. And he's this older construction worker, pothead. I mean, it was just the worst possible situation. I'm like, okay, what do I say to her? Because when abuse is in this situation, I got to get the school involved and authorities and all that, which we did. But I was like, what do you want to do? What's your dream? And she's like, oh, well, I want to go to Broadway and be a dancer. I said, oh, that's great. I'm like, what are you going to do to get there? And she said, oh, I already got a scholarship at NYU, but my husband won't let me go. And it turns out she was 17. She eloped and got married to this guy. And she wasn't even a boyfriend, girlfriend. They were technically married, but it wasn't obviously valid. But she said, he won't let me go. And I said, look, this isn't a real marriage. You eloped to Vegas without your parents' permission. Like, I said, you need to move back in with your parents, get rid of this dude. They'll take care of your parents, get the scholarship. And so we kept in touch via email. And she said, yeah, she went back to the parents. And then she said the guy came to the house and started throwing rocks up at her window saying, you get back, you're mine or whatever. But she stood her ground and stayed with the parents. Then we kept in touch for a while and then kind of lost base with each other. And then I got an email just out of the blue once, and she said, I want to send you tickets. And I'm like, tickets? And she's like, yeah, Broadway, I made it. And she ended up getting the NYU thing, going over there to the dance program and made it. And she said, even better than that, I found an awesome Catholic guy and I'm bringing him home to my parents for Thanksgiving. And it's just, and that's the idea, is like, this is marriage preparation when it should be happening, when these guys are 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, not 6 weeks before the wedding, and now you're just cramming for the test. I mean, that's triage. That's not even marriage prep. And so, there's been a lot of beautiful glory stories, and I know it's just because of the fruit of these cloistered Carmelite nuns.
But you do it too, praise God, and I totally agree with that. But I've heard you speak before, and one of the things that I feel like you do is that, like, you're not talking at them. You're side by side locking arms, and you're pointing out, like, we've been lied to, and there's a truth, and there's a beauty that's out there, and you're worth it.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. Not only the resonating with the girls. I mean, I met a seminarian yesterday, and he said, yeah, last time you came here, he said, it was 5 years ago. I was a sophomore. You gave a chastity talk, and he said, that was the last day of my life I've looked at porn. I got it out of my life that day. It was done. Yeah. And he said, I never looked back, and I felt called to the priesthood, and now he just joined the seminary about 5 weeks ago.
Do not drain the power of the cross in our life.
Yeah.
And feels like never too late to start either. We talk a lot of times about on this show, the man on the fence, or just people that are maybe just taking the first step forward, on this path. Yeah. Again, going back to the beginning, chastity can sound like an intimidating word.
Yeah.
What you've shared so far, and what we know is that it is the beautiful gift of love, your entire personhood.
Yeah.
But maybe for the person that this word even feels uncomfortable, and of course you're saying, well, don't turn it over to somebody else for all of the ills and ails that come of that. But the person taking this first step, okay, Jason, you've got my attention.
Yeah.
Chastity. Where do I start with this?
Yeah, well, I mean, where I would start if I wasn't in the best spot, and go to the Sacrament of Reconciliation. Go and talk to the priest and just dump it out. He'll help you sift through, what's a sin, what's not a sin. Because a lot of times we think that sexual desire is lust. And as long as I have sexual desires, I keep failing God. And if I get really, really pure, then I won't have any more sexual desires. Women won't even be sexually attractive to me anymore, and I'll be really pure. Like that's dead. That's not pure. You don't even have a pulse anymore. But as long as we confuse sexual desire with lust, we'll give up really fast, because that's not even human to try to do that. And so what lust is the reduction of a human person to their sexual value. So a woman has a sexual value, she does, but she also has a personal value, and there needs to be a hierarchy to those values. And so chastity is about making the effort of the will, that maybe a woman's coming to me and she kind of looks like her sexual value is the greatest thing she has to offer, and I have to make an act of the will to make her personal value first. And so it requires, an exercise of the will, but then you become free to love her rightly. And so I would say if you've made mistakes, as we all have, go on a Saturday afternoon to your parish, usually around 4:00 in the afternoon, and just go in there and just talk and just let it all out. And don't just go to confession, but have a great confession. Because a lot of times people go, but their confession stinks. It's like, I did this and this and this. And then they just kind of tuck one away. And then, it's like, what about that one? Oh, we don't need to talk about that. It happened a while ago, a little embarrassing. I know a guy tried to do that to Padre Pio once, who could read your soul. And, that never a great idea with him. And Padre Pio just looked at the guy and said, you live near water, but you don't wash. In other words, don't just go to confession, have a great confession. So if I'm going to start anywhere, I would just go and just wipe the slate clean. I mean, you could literally get your baptismal innocence restored to you if you want it. It's right there, but we don't receive the gifts, and then we complain it's hard to live. So he's given us these tools, these weapons. It's like, being in the military and like sitting on a tank and being like, I'm helpless. It's just like, dude, crawl down and pull the trigger on the thing. And then you realize you got some firepower. So, from confession to mass to the rosary, the sacramentals, I mean, the weapons are there. Use those and then get plugged into good men, because we need male fellowship, or otherwise you're just kind of going Lone Ranger, won't get far. Like I say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. So,
yeah. Hey, this is Chris Price from the Point Man Podcast. Just a quick reminder, we are a nonprofit 501c3 company. To financially support our mission, please go to our website at thepointmanpodcast.com. That's thepointmanpodcast.com. Thank you for your prayers and support. We are praying for you, each and every Point Man listening. Now let's get back to the show. Clint, anything on your mind? You've been paying close attention so far.
And I definitely appreciate, staying close to the sacraments for Catholic men, but are there some other practical tips or some things, like Chris is saying, we try to reach out to the man on the fence, so maybe some of these men, some of the dads that are listening are not particularly close to the sacraments. Yeah. So are there some practical tips that you can maybe talk about, and where you were saying, where do you start, and also too, kind of a second part is, I think we carry around a considerable amount of shame and guilt, and that keeps people from getting started. Yeah. So how do you, how do we overcome that, I guess?
Yeah, I remember a boy came up to me after the chastity talk at his school last week, and it was a high school of 1,100 boys. And after the talks, we put out tables full of chastity books on how to break free from porn and how to do this and how to do that. And he came up and he's like, "Can we talk?" And I'm like, "Yeah, what's up?" And he's like, "I think I'm only one here struggling with pornography." And I'm like, "Son, turn around, look at the porn recovery books. Where are they?" And he's like, "Oh, they're all gone." And I'm like, "Yes, they're all gone. They disappeared. All the boys took them." I'm like, "No, this is a human battle." And so one of the principal spirit that the evil one's going to want to really impress on you when you start to work on these is discouragement. And just get you to give up. That's the principal temptation that we actually have to battle against. And it can be hard because, we can have a history of these addictions and we start defining ourselves by them. I remember a good priest saying, "Look, God knows your sins, but he calls you by your name. The devil knows your name, but he calls you by your sins." Your identity is not your woundedness and your brokenness. But to really tap in, what is it you really want? I remember hearing this guy, he was a Christian, but he wasn't living the life in the least. Strip clubs, prostitute, cheating on his wife, porn, you name it, he's into it. And he finally just can't take it anymore. And so he confesses to another Christian guy that he kind of look up to. And he said, I'm not the good guy that everybody thinks I am around here. I'm doing all this stuff. And the guy said to him, "Well, if what you really want to do is look at porn and masturbate, then go ahead and do it." And the guy's like, "What?" And the guy's like, no, if what you really want to do is look at porn and masturbate, and go ahead and do it. And the guy was kind of frustrated. He pounds the desk. He's like, "No, it's not what I really want to do." And the guy said, "Exactly." Yeah. And he realized it was this watershed moment where he realized, I'm not this depraved, miserable wretch. I really ache to be a better man, to be the husband, the father that I know that I'm supposed to be. And then, you fall short and you just give up. But you got to tap into that ache. I remember one high school girl coming up to me and she said, Jason, I found out my dad looks at porn. She said, I used to look up to him. Now I can't even look at him anymore. Thought he was a better man than that. She's like, Jason, my dad's lusting after girls 2 years older than I am while my mom's sleeping in the next room. And then he erases internet history, thinks we don't know, kisses my mom and goes to work the next day. She said, it makes me sick how much I resent the guy. She said, it creeps me out when my dad hugs me now. And it's like, as a father, you hear that. It's like, holy cow, that's not the father I'd want to be. And so you can't do it out of like shame and guilt, but just love of your daughter, love of your wife, love of God. And it's because nothing's stronger than lust, in my opinion, than love. And if we're using shame and guilt and all that other stuff, it might work for a few minutes, but then it's back at it because it's really not going to be the fuel that you need. And so do it for love of your wife, your girlfriend, God. That's the motive that I think will last.
And then if we can just talk about like St. Joseph here, like obviously the church touts him as St. Joseph most chaste. And he's married to Our Lady, the most beautiful woman ever created, like the pinnacle of creation. And yet there's a joy there with chastity. I think a lot of times, listening to chastity, we see like, we want to be better. But if you can just highlight to the listener, like, but why? What is that? What's the joys coming out of chastity? Because obviously St. Joseph lived a life of great joy, great prayer. I mean, he was fully alive, you know? And at the same time, living with a beautiful woman.
Yeah, no, I hate most Catholic artwork of Joseph that depicts him as like this elderly man because it's so off the mark. There's no historical evidence whatsoever he was elderly. It's a misguided way of artists trying to protect Mary's innocence. Like, we're just going to make him look like he's 80, so we wouldn't have any interest in that anyway. It's like it's no. Like you don't get more pure with age. You don't. I mean, you read the book of Daniel, the story of Susanna. You know, the two men trying to seduce her. They were old guys,
right?
And Daniel's like how you've grown wicked with age. Now your sins have come to term upon you. But Joseph, Mary's spotless purity was not protected by Joseph's, sterility or his senility. Her purity was protected by his virtue, his virility. I mean, the average guy would get married back then at the age of 18. And so I like to think about that. Like, okay, God took the most beautiful woman ever to walk the face of the earth and entrusted her spotless virginity to a college-aged guy. It's like, chew on that one a bit. Like, so his love was not a threat to her purity. His love was the safeguard of her purity. That's where it came from. And so it's so misguided to be like, oh, he was this old guy and she's this 14-year-old girl, and that's what's going to keep them apart. It's like, no, his love is what made him the guardian of the virgin. His love for the virgin is what made him the terror of demons. And I think the reason he's able to live out these vocations is because he was a man of silence. I mean, we don't have a word from him in all the sacred scriptures. I mean, the angel tells him, go, hun, we're up, we're gone, we go. Like, he just does. And so he's obviously a listening man. He's not endlessly, chattering, yapping, doom scrolling on his phone, whatever. Like, he's a man whose ears are open to the Father, and that's why he's able to accomplish what the mission entrusted to him.
And I know you have a devotion to Our Lady. What about the spousal cooperation there as well? He's giving something to Our Lady in his chastity, but she's also helping refine his virtue by her virtue. I mean, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but Our Lady's giving something to St. Joseph that helps him on this journey as well.
No, for sure. I mean, I don't think anything quite inspires masculinity as much as authentic femininity.
Yes.
That's why modesty is so powerful. It's almost like an unspoken declaration of, don't even try to use me because you will get rejected, because, you will not lift the veil over this body until you lift the veil over my face. It's like an invitation of respect. And imagine the femininity that would have been exuded by just Our Lady's presence. It would have just inspired such authentic masculinity. Like, if we're sitting here shooting the breeze and like, three, fully habited religious sister nuns come in, everybody just sits up a little, and you just feel like, okay, I'm being called to be a gentleman in the presence of a lady. It's just automatic. And so I think a man will be as much of a gentleman as a woman requires. And when a culture of the women don't require much from the gentleman, they're like, well, who needs to be a knight in shining armor when, she'll hook up with me and doesn't even care if I text her the next day. And so this isn't to put the blame on the women. If anything, Pope John Paul II sits more squarely on the guys than the girls. But yeah, I find that being around women living out their feminine vocation inspires me to do the same in masculinity.
Think about two things. One, you talked about this before about the heart being a battlefield, and it's like which are you feeding? Is this love or lust? And speak about that. But also too, in the book, Father Hicks mentions that a chaste man is not that he loves less, but he loves more. Can you? So those are my two questions.
Yeah, in terms of what you're feeding, it's like I got. We're a half hour late to the podcast. I was feeding gators on the bayou. We stopped by.
There you go.
And we stopped by, and I just wanted to see one, and there were like 6 of them right there.
That's
and
a worthy excuse. For
It
sure.
was
Yes.
great. Yeah, and so this lady came out of the restaurant that she was like, and we were talking about the gators, and she's like, well, let me see if I got some food. She went in, and she could bring us a tray of like raw meat and fish and raw chicken, and so she's letting me slop it out. These big old gators are coming up and eating them, and imagine if like this one I'm just going to give all the meat to, and then that one I'll throw a little shrimp po' boy to or whatever. But this guy gets all the protein.
Yeah.
It's obvious who's going to grow and get bigger. And so it's the same thing. It's like in me is love and lust. Okay, what am I feeding love? Well, I went to Mass on Sunday. Okay, great. You need that bread of angels. There's nothing more powerful than the Eucharist. But what else during the week? I don't know. I prayed grace before meals. Okay, but how about the lust? Well, yeah, I did listen to like 8 hours of impure music, this week in the gym total. And I had some really trashy conversations with my friends. I am addicted to porn. I did spend 9 hours in it, and you start like, wow, like I gave that a buffet. And that's why St. Paul says, make no room for provisions for desires of the flesh. And a provision is like storehouses of food, and the Lord of the Rings, the lampas bread, that was their provisions. That would last them on the journey. And Paul says, make no provisions for the desires of the flesh. And so if you're feeding it all this stuff, you have to gradually starve it out, and it's not going to go away, but it becomes so much more, easy, to have self-mastery as long as it's going to be as hard. Chastity is going to be as hard as you make it, is the way I look at it. As men, we cause 90% of our own temptations, by what we look at and who we hang out with. But then we want to just blame it on women for why it's hard to be pure. We're in so much more control of the situation than we think. And so to me, so you got the 2 dogs fighting, feed one, reading books on St. Joseph, Father Boniface Hicks, and listening to podcasts, going to Mass, confession, rosary, male fellowship, adoration. There's so many ways to feed it while you're starving the lust. And what was really hard early on, like when I started lifting weights when I was in high school, it's like a 45-pound bar in the gym, and you're like, hey! You're like, you'll the little skinny arms, and then, but I got to college, you're now I'm taking my creatine, I'm doing this, and I was able to bench like 285 by the time I was done with college,
Yes.
But what was initially really hard with enough perseverance and just putting in the reps, resistance builds strength.
That's right.
And so if I'm not putting any plates on, then I'm not going to build any strength, and the world's going to give us plenty of resistance, and you keep working against that. And what used to be so hard becomes natural and easy, and then you become free. I mean, the activity might look pointless. Like, what's the point of just doing this? Like, when are you ever going to use that in life? Oh, you'd be surprised, having to push someone away or lift this thing up. Like, the point is not this bare repetition that you're going to need in real life, but it translates to being able to be the one who can protect your wife and kids, not only physically, but God willing, spiritually as well. So, but the motive, like, as you said, is love. I mean, it's not about I talked to a guy today, he came right up after the assembly, and he said, he said, my girlfriend and I are sleeping together. She doesn't go to school here. He's like, what do I do? And I gave him the link that he could listen to the talk and show it to her. And hey, here's the video, and you could share it with her. And he wanted to do it. I'm like, you understand full well, I'm not asking you to love her any less. I'm asking you to love her more.
Yes.
A love that's sacrificial, that's responsible, that's demanding, that's authentic. I'm calling you guys up. And he took it, and he's like, yeah, I want to. Like, I really want to love her right. And I'm like, you got to put the pants on and go tell her this is what we need to do. And I said, she might not understand it. She might be like, would you like another girl? You don't want to be with me anymore. I'm like, no. I want to fall in love with you for all the right reasons. I want to love you rightly. And I said, she'll feel so cherished and loved that you're not going to take everything she's willing to give, but the motive has to be for love. And he totally received that.
Praise God.
I'm thinking about this image of this great reverence that St. Joseph, and I don't know if I flashed the cover of the book here, though. Through the Heart of St. Joseph is the book that we're going through this season, written by Father Boniface Hicks. It's phenomenal. But just this image of the great reverence that he would have for Our Lady, that would help him grow in virtue. He was very aware of what this role is as given to him by a dream, that he'd be the foster father of Jesus Christ. And so I think this awe of the challenge, the opportunity, like that's all in front of him. And I just wonder if there's an opportunity for all of us to see it more that way, like St. Joseph did, where, oh, well, that was for him, and this was a special circumstance. Like, I can't live a chaste marriage. I don't know if that sounds weird, but maybe that's for holy people, and not relevant to me.
Can I pull a thread on that?
Yeah, please.
I think that's such a great question for the listeners. Like, most of the guys listening to this are married, and so what does chastity look like? I mean, we're not living Josephite marriages, so what does chastity look like in a practicing Catholic's, sacramental marriage?
I think you want to begin with, well, what is the purpose and meaning of our human sexuality to begin with? You got to begin with that understanding. And one way that the church looks at it is that as your wedding vows made flesh, that when you stood on the altar, do you two promise today to come here freely? Yes. Without reservation. Will you be faithful? Yes. Will you welcome children? Yes. So you kind of make these vows and promises. Your love will be free and total and faithful and welcoming children. And then you leave the church and you enter the sanctuary of your bedroom, and on the altar of the marriage bed, you exchange the vows, not with your words, but with your body. I give my body to you freely. I'm not coercing you. I'm not manipulating you. I'm not pressuring you. I'm certainly not paying you. Like, this is a free gift of self, not only freely received, but it's freely given. I don't see you as an outlet of my lust.
Right.
I have enough self-mastery to make a gift of myself. So it's a free gift. It's total. Like, I hold back nothing from you, not even my fatherhood. It's faithful, not just with my body, but my imagination. I remember a woman telling me she was going through a divorce and cleaning out her bed and lifted up the mattress, and under it was a stack of Maxim's men's softcore porn magazines. And she said, no wonder we struggle so much with intimacy. Like, the very moment he's supposed to be renewing his wedding vows in the flesh, he's committing adultery in his heart. The very moment he's supposed to be making love to me, he's using my body to lust after these women in his imagination. And so that's not a total faithful gift, not only the body, but the heart and the mind as well. And then lastly, it's a love that's ordered towards procreation. It's open to the gift of human life. It's never contracepted, sterilized, or aborted. And some people are like, okay, you had me until that, but like, what do you want us to have? 10 kids, 15 kids, have our own next reality show? I mean, that's just not realistic. What are we going to do this, Vatican roulette NFP thing with like the 50% failure rate? It's like, there's so much misinformation there. I remember I used to do talks for engaged couples in San Diego. I gave them a survey and said, in one sentence, define natural family planning. And this 26-year-old woman said, oh, that's a way to have sex that meets church requirements. I'm like, oh, wow. Doesn't that sound like fun? But that's all she thought it was, like this rule thing. But what NFP, it was like fertility awareness methods, meaning you're not using pills and barriers and all that other stuff. Instead of doing that, you're understanding your your wife's fertility. And so what it taught me is that my wife's body is actually perfect. Like, she doesn't need shots and pills and drugs. What she needs to be is understood. And if we can understand her fertility, then instead of kind of suppressing that with chemicals to conform to our desires, we conform our desires to the perfect way her body's already been created. And so it's like an authentic sexual liberation. And it's really physically good for the woman's body because, A, you don't have to worry about any of the side effects of all the birth control stuff from breast cancer. I read one journal of ophthalmology said that women on the pill will blink 32% more often than those not on the pill. I made the mistake of mentioning that at a high school assembly once, and some girls were like, look, that girl's on the pill. And she's like, no, I'm not. Stop looking at me, guys. So you don't want to judge people. But it's all these physiological changes from the synthetic sex hormones you don't need to be on. And so NFP, if there are fertility issues, if you're charting, you can actually learn what those are by charting. I knew of one couple, they had a big conversion, and then they quit using contraception, started using NFP, and then the husband was looking at the chart, and he's like, that doesn't look right, that's going on this time of the month, and the wife's like, So they went to the doctor together, and the wife's like, yeah, my husband thinks something's wrong in my chart, and the doctor looked, and he's like, yeah, I think something is off. I think it has to do with the thyroid. Please, right now, I'm going to make an appointment for you this afternoon. Go to the thyroid specialist. This could be urgent. And so they went there, and the thyroid specialist looked, and sure enough, she had a cancerous tumor growing on her thyroid. They operated the next day and saved the mother's life.
Wow, praise
if they were
God.
contracepting, she'd be dead.
Yeah.
Just because they would never have known. But because you're holding your health chart in your hands with NFP, you're so far ahead of the game. And not only with postponing pregnancy, but planning, like, you know exactly when, if you do want to conceive. And so for a guy, you know, when I talked to engaged couples about this, like, I don't really need the theology and the philosophy. Is it good for my wife's body?
Yeah.
All right, when's the class? Like, it's really not that complicated. And so the chastity inside of marriage would involve that. You know, am I planning my family according to God's plan for human sexuality? Am I staying away from contraception? Am I being respectful of my wife when she's exhausted or tired or whatever? Because if I'm not, and I lack that tenderness, is what John Paul calls it, she'll gradually become frigid towards the husband because she feels like she's just this outlet for his needs, and she'll begin to close herself off from him. But that gets healed through the husband's tenderness, is really recognizing her needs as well instead of those of his own. And all that is kind of to create this culture of conjugal chastity that John Paul talks about. Yeah.
And that was like a topic we were addressing a couple episodes ago, is this idea of tenderness, which St. Joseph models well. And I'll call him Saint, Father Boniface Hicks fleshes out really well, like tearing up, like, wow, like just the tenderness of his fatherhood and his love within the domestic church of the Holy Family. And I don't know if you can speak to that, Jason, just this idea of tenderness. I think a lot of guys doing well, right? There's like iron and velvet, so they're like protecting on the outside, but when they come in the threshold of the door, a lot of guys aren't getting accolades out in the public square or at their office for being tender. They're not getting like promoted for being tender and loving, but it's 100% of like what's required within the home. Yeah. And a lot of guys, maybe they know the book answer, but was it modeled well? I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yeah, and when John Paul explains what tenderness is, he contrasts it with something he calls mawkishness. And I read that first, I'm like, I don't even know what mawkishness is, and I'm like looking it up on a thesaurus. But it was like this overly PDA, sappy, affectionate tenderness where you kind of want something out of the person, so you get like overly affectionate. Kind of like that, the high school couple that's always all over each other in the hallway, and it's just like, dude, you got to give it a break. But he's trying to be super tender so that he can get something later. That's not what John Paul's talking about. It's not just like physical affection. I'm really soft around her. It's not about being a male girlfriend. What it means is that you're attentive to her needs and you're perceptive of them before it gets to a boiling point of where she just explodes of like all this stuff and you're clueless. Where you're kind of like, okay, does she need to sleep in? You know, does she need help with the kids, homework, whatever? Like, how can I serve you today? That type of mentality. I mean, it was interesting, you know, when Charlie Kirk was assassinated and then Erica gave her address, you know, I think 2 nights later, she said that, you know, Charlie would always come to me every day, what can I do to be a better husband? What can I do to be a better father? That he was actually inquiring of his wife how he could love her better as a husband. And so it's that open receptivity of just like, because, you know, we tend to give love in the type of love we want. Yes. And so if I feel loved by physical affection, then I'll just give her that. And then, you know, but it's like, no. Her love language might be 180 degrees different than mine. And so, you know, I'm planning my next date for my wife. She doesn't know, but I bought her tickets. I actually got us tickets, legit tickets.
We'll keep it a secret.
Japanese sumo wrestling tournament because I know her love language. Because I mean, you think romance, you know, how attractive will I look after 2 hours looking at that? But that would be my love language. That's a fun date for me. But it's like tenderness is like, okay, but what makes her feel connected? You know, what makes her come alive and her dreams and her wishes? And so my wife and I went on a marriage retreat recently because marriage has been hard, like really hard. And so we went on this marriage retreat and they gave us this little like bullet points every night for 5 minutes. We're supposed to go through this checklist with each other, you know, and the first one is like, you know, what do I appreciate? You know, I really appreciate a day when you did blah, blah, blah. And then she'll kick one back my way. And then you do like a little apology. And then you'll actually bring up a pain point, you know, and ask for resolution. You're not pressing like the World War III button, but you are bringing up something that, you know, because you got to get all these done in 5 minutes. Right. And that's what kind of motivates men to be consistent, because this is not going to open this 3-hour can of worms argument. It's like, no, 5 minutes a night check-in. And then you're also talking about your hopes and your dreams, prayer petition from each other, and you're just kind of checking in. It's like a daily temperature reading on the marriage, because you can go months by, you know, never saying what I appreciate about you, or I'm sorry for this, or will you forgive me for that? And so it's just kind of a forced checklist that we're kind of learning to do, because we're 23 years into marriage and we still feel like total rookies. But that tenderness is just kind of a receptivity of her needs, and it'll bear a lot of fruit.
And the longer you put those conversations off, the harder it is to do it. The harder it is to break the ice. You know?
Yeah.
And that's like to Charlie Kirk's point, like he would ask daily, like, how can I be a better husband? How can I be a better father? I mean, when you're doing that on a daily basis, it's not hard to break the ice.
Yeah.
That's thank you for sharing that just about your own, marriage and the relationship there, because obviously I suspect it could be, you'd be forgiven if people, well, Jason's got it all figured out. And, he talks on the subject and tours, internationally on the subject. So you've got it together, man. You're good.
Our marriage,
you don't need this.
Yeah, no, our marriage isn't perfect because she's not perfect. Because if she was perfect, then we'd have a perfect marriage. But that's what I literally. But it's like no, like I mean, we've gone to marriage counseling lots of times in our marriage, and I have no shame in saying that. It's like no, I'm sick and go to the doctor. I ruptured my bicep tendon playing basketball. I went to the doctor. No, you go. And to me, there's no shame in saying like, yeah, we've been through some super rough patches where we couldn't figure our way out of the woods. And, we took a lot of advantage of Dr. Bob Schutz, the JP2 Healing Center, went on a retreat with him and, getting spiritual direction from Father Boniface. And we're not this kind of like stagnant, closed in on ourselves, all figured out thing. Cause we've gone through those seasons and it's just like, that ain't working. And
I've heard it said like, I think with LeBron James like spends like $1 million on his body, like he does all this stuff to surround himself with all the things that he needs. Why? Because he knows that if I do this, performance is going to, excel.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like we got to take that mindset and say, like, what are we doing? How are we being intentional in our relationship with the Lord, with our spouse, with our kids? Like we've got to do the work and not think that all of a sudden if we're asking for help or if we're trying to find the answer somehow we're at less. Yeah. But that's actually shows how serious you are about your yes.
So we should spend like $1 million on our wife each year. Is what you're saying?
Right, exactly. Translation. Exactly.
No, you'll get what you put in.
Yeah. And I feel like porn, lust, all of these temptations that are out there, they're just distractions from actually going into the deep of true love. Yeah. And the devil would very much like you to just be on the surface and just distracted, by something else that is not at the core of what God calls us to be. Yeah. But those everyday distractions, temptations, one, they're all over the place. Yeah. And two, trip up, plenty of people have tripped up me in the past. It's not a fun thing to just like persevere through those things. But I also feel like it's just something that like the devil would just love to keep you there and never experience the true depths of love. Yeah. Whether you're married or not married. I mean, really, could keep marriages very surface in that way too.
Yeah, but to me, like when it comes to those kinds of addiction, defeat it just isn't even an option. I remember I was flying to Africa once to do some talks on a long plane ride from, I think, Atlanta to Johannesburg. And I'm just going through the movies and I saw it was 127 hours, which is this guy hiking in Utah, checking out these slot canyons, and he slips and he kind of falls down. This massive boulder rolls down, pins like an 800-pound boulder his arm against the cavern wall. And he can't get out, and he tries all these different pulleys and this and that, and can't get out. And then he kind of just resigns himself to the fact he's gonna die. Pulls out a knife, and he's like, it's not worth it to cut my arm off. And then then it's really getting close to the end, and he's kind of hallucinating and kind of going in and out. He's all dehydrated and dying, and then he has like this vision, a hallucination of a little boy coming to him, and it was his son, but he wasn't married, didn't have any kids, but he realized like, if I don't get out of this hole, that boy won't exist. And he's like, okay, game on, pulls off his belt, ties a tourniquet around his arm, gets out the knife, cuts through the muscle tissue, breaks his radius and ulna, and then hobbles out of this cave, was rescued by highway patrol, helicopter took him to the hospital, and he lived. And as the credits of the movie are rolling, it doesn't show the actor at the end, it shows the actual man this happened to, sitting on a couch with his wife, his prosthetic limb, and his little boy between them. And to me, it's like sometimes the addiction is like that rock, and it's just like, it's just going to be a part of my existence. Like, no. If you don't cut this off, like your whole family might not be, your whole vocation might get lost. That's what's it's at stake here. And sometimes the vision of what you stand to lose is what's needed to motivate you to realize this isn't my destiny.
We're called to life-giving love.
Yeah.
What are the corresponding virtues there? So like obviously tourniquet, knife, like when you're in that position, like what are some corresponding virtues to chastity?
Well, I mean, if there's anything that you got to cut off instead of just being the porn or whatever, it's like, it's my pride. That's the one that stings of like being actually to be accountable to another guy and to be humble, because the devil doesn't know what to do with humility because he has none of it. It's a complete, it's a weapon beyond his control. And so to have that humility of just like, hey, Father, could we meet on Saturday afternoon and just get some spiritual direction? Yeah, sure. And then you start being accountable and then answerable to someone. And confession isn't just like you go priest hopping every 3 weeks to a different one so no one can say, oh, that guy's from Vietnam, I'm going to go to him, like, so they can't smell the trail of your sin. It's like, no, you got to find a good spiritual director, confessor, and then just go consistently. And then they can say, okay, we tried this. That's not working. Let's try this. Because you look at any military or leader, any president, prime minister, they surround themselves with a cabinet of advisors. They give them advice on foreign diplomacy, economic affairs, military intelligence, public policy. And if they know how to listen well, then they're going to govern wisely. But if they're full of like hubris, they'll just drive the nation into ruin. So the same thing in a marriage. Like if I'm my own little island and I'm not answerable to anybody, I'd have no accountability. It's just going to be a dumpster fire. So I would say that the wound that you need to strike if we're going to make any progress in chastity is the one to our own pride.
And then the tourniquet, Sam, on that analogy, I think of just the blood of Christ washing us clean. Again, you mentioned, confession very early on in the discussion. And yeah, for me, a good confession on those very, painful to discuss sins was monumental, like coming out of the confessional, just full on crying, to experience Christ's forgiveness in that way. It can be life changing. Yeah. It has the ability to. We've got to come to the table and offer it. Yeah. And I think we've talked about this a good bit now, but that tactic of the devil to make you feel. I mean, this young man who's going, I'm the only one that's addicted to pornography.
1,100 boys.
1,100 boys. This is how diabolical Satan would be. Yeah. To think that I'm the only person to ever have this challenge or this struggle. Yeah. We know it's not true, but it's a prevalent lie.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if it's not what you are looking at the phone, sometimes not necessarily the quality of what you're looking, but the quantity. Mm-hmm. Like for me, the other day I came home from the office, and I was helping the kids with homework, and I decided I'm just going to take my phone, I'm just going to throw it in the cabinet. I'm not going to look at it for a while and just be present to the kids. Yeah. And it really bothered me how often I felt its absence. And like I just walked down the hall, and I'd be like normally I would check a score. I would see if I got a new text. I'd see if there's another email I need to get to. And it really kind of messed me up of just like, if I were this attentive to the Holy Spirit, I would be a full-blown mystic, but it was really scary of just like, and part of me is like, well, I got a job. I got to take care of family. If I don't answer the text now, I'm going to have to do it at bedtime when I want to be present. Like all these reasons why I have to have that little, life support on me, but it's just like, holy cow, I need to really get this in check, because it's bad. Like I'm even when I'm driving, like, oh man, if I can get these emails done before I, get home, then I can be more present. And it's just this constant do instead of just being, which is, the spirituality more of St. Joseph.
So you talked about like Satan wants to discourage us, right? I think that's one of his tactics, but it's like to discourage us from doing what? It's like making that sacrifice, the sacrifice that we're called to make in our, threefold office of priest, prophet, and king, to be able to lift up our prayers and our sacrifices for another. And I feel like that's the formation that we need to grow in our faith, to be able to love authentically, to be able to be free from these things, to sacrifice whatever it is that's holding us down, so that we can be free and be life-giving in our families. Yeah,
and who am I? I don't have it all figured out, and so I'm just going to stay in boot camp and on the training field, because I don't want to enter the fray because I don't have it all figured out.
Or I'm not perfect, or who am I? And all these like false sense of humility. And it's like, no, the Lord has called you. He has redeemed you. He has given you this strength. He's given you this mission, and you've got what it takes because He is with us.
Yeah. There's a line that I think you had pointed out previously, Jason, in the through the Heart of St. Joseph book. So I'll just read it from Father Hicks here. A chaste man does not love less. He loves more. He does not see less. He sees more. He does not necessarily have less passion in his heart, but could even have more, although it is fully under the direction of his reason, and thus perfectly subject to the will of God. Seen in this light, an old Joseph could have been a man who cherished Mary deeply because of his many years of self-mastery and virtue, seeing her beauty more clearly and reverencing her deeply in the light of who she is in the eyes of God. Furthermore, in regard to Joseph as protector, we have marveled on many occasions at old men, even though octogenarians who have kept up their youthful strength. I think Father Hicks is maybe just leaving open these interpretations. I mean, I agree with you. I think, the youth and vigor that he has, his virality, I think he had all of his, most masculine testosterone-filled faculties to him. Yeah. And he saw more, not less, in his chastity. Guys, there's just this beautiful challenge to all of us to follow that route and that model. Not exactly like Saint Joseph, in that model. What am I missing in that analogy, or is that?
No, I think that when it comes to the invitation that we're being called to, that regardless of our age, we're called to perfection. We're called to be holy as our Heavenly Father is holy. And I love the idea of to lean in on that humility. That I remember I was giving a talk one time to a group of married couples, and in the front row was a couple. They were in their 90s and had been married for 70 years. And I was like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sit down, and I want y'all to come up and you give the talk, right? And they said, no, Jason, I always feel like it's important to grow and to continue to learn more how we can do this better. And I'm like, guys, did y'all just hear that? That's what we need. To always be open to receive what God is asking of us, to always be attentive to grow and where God is calling us to grow and to be the people that we're called to be. So, yeah, regardless of where we are, whether if we haven't done this at all, or we've been striving and we fell off the wagon, or whether we've been distracted by so many things, get back in the game. The Lord is calling us by name. Get a band of brothers, get closer to the Lord, go to the sacraments, go to the Word of God, find the good books that are going to help remind us of this great calling that we've been given, and let's build up the body of Christ together.
This is the part of the podcast where we do our tactics and takeaways, and I think, Jason, you just gave yours right there. Clint, Sam, tactics, takeaways?
Not much from me. I mean, I'm just incredibly inspired by the conversation. Really appreciate you being here with us. And I encourage the men out there, us men that are on the fence, to like you said, Jason, just to get started or to just dive more deeply. So just thank you so much for being here. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, I want to echo that. Yeah, thank you, Jason. Thanks for coming on the show, and thank you for what you do for the youth and for the church, and thanks for being with us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on, and I think my takeaway that I need to work on, I need to detach from my phone just a lot more. Even though, just the fact that I was just so bothered by missing it for a few minutes. My priest back home said the Holy Spirit talks to you 100 times a day. How often are you listening? Well, probably 3 of those come through because I'm too busy checking emails.
Yes.
And it's just to create room for silence, then I'll just be a better person. My dad is a good man, but a lot of us didn't have dads that were just running the spiritual show at home. We went to Mass every Sunday and Grace Before Meals, but now I have my own family. It's how do I do the spiritual leader thing? I'm just still trying to figure out what to do, but I think the first step is just creating room for more silence.
Yeah, that's a nice, doesn't have to be hero ball, just micro movements in the right direction, and that's a very nice one. I like that a lot. Would you give us a little hope here at the end of the podcast? It can feel overwhelming. It can feel like the odds are in the favor of the enemy. Yeah. Whether it's on this topic, there's just can be feelings of maybe hopelessness, despair. Yeah. This challenge is too big, but you have talked about some of these glory stories, but where do you see the hope in all of this? Yeah, no, the devil obviously going to tempt you to despair, discouragement. But you realize, one of my priest friends says sin just makes you stupid. And so if you think of the devil, in a sense, there's a brilliant intellect, he's an angelic being, but in the same respect, his own sin blinds him to the point where he thought Calvary was a win. He thought we got him now. It's no, that's a slight miscalculation, And so in the same respect, it's in our weaknesses that Christ's strength can be manifest. And so don't think that chastity is just getting, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's just okay, God, I need you. And the scriptures promise, Christ says, I will complete the good work that I began in you. And so that's the promise that we have, through Paul, that he'll complete it. It's his work. He started it. And by virtue of your baptism, you have the indwelling of the Blessed Trinity in you, and therefore you have what it takes.
Even if you doubt yourself, you've got it. Christ is alive in you, and just let yourself be weak, let yourself be loved by the Father, and then he'll accomplish great things through you.
Amazing. Amen. And if people want to learn more, author of 15, 16 books, I don't know if you'd point to one as a starter, and also where can they go online to learn more about your mission?
We got a website called chastity.com. It's super easy to remember there. In terms of any one particular book, if it's a single guy, I'd say we have a book called The Dating Blueprint that kind of teaches guys dating etiquette and all that stuff. We have a book called Forged. It's a 33-day plan for guys on how to have lasting freedom when it comes to sexual sins and things like that. And we don't sell them in single copies. You have to get them in pairs. That's how badly we want people doing this in fellowship together. And so Forged is a good one. And then we got other books for dads, parents, and all kinds of stuff. Everything's at chastity.com. And then other one is we've got a wilderness backpacking thing for guys and girls called jp2trails.com, where we teach theology of the body out in the mountains. So chastity.com and jp2trails.
Jason, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Sam, Clint, Jason, as always, Gerardo, Nathan, I failed to shout you guys out at the beginning. Guys working hard behind the scenes to make everybody look good here. Thank you. Really, really exciting season to come here on St. Joseph, leaning into the OG point man, St. Joseph. Please pray for us. In the meantime, thank you for listening. Live a life of virtue. Stay close to the sacraments. Be the point man for your family.
Man, what another great show today. I want to thank all of our listeners for spending the time with us. I want to challenge you, if you've enjoyed this, please share this show with another husband or father that you know, or leave us a review on Google, Apple, or Spotify. We'll see you next time.
I rise up like smoke from a gun.